Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, today we are diving into what is honestly one of the most high-stakes, dramatic geopolitical shifts happening in the world right now, and it's happening completely out of sight. We're talking about a literal race at the very top of the world, because climate change is opening up a brand new road across the Arctic, and global superpowers, well, they're scrambling to control exactly what goes underneath it.
For all of human history, the roof of the world was a wall. It's crazy to think about, right? A massive, completely impenetrable cap of permanent ice sitting directly over the absolute shortest path between Europe and Asia. Because no ship could cross it, and absolutely no cable could be laid beneath it, the data that connects half of our entire planet has always been forced to take the really long way around. It has to go way down through the Suez Canal, squeezing into the narrow throat of the Red Sea, right past some incredibly vulnerable and highly contested borders.
Which brings us to Chapter 1, the Southern Trap. Suddenly, the world is absolutely desperate to bypass this old routing system.
Get a load of this number. Over 90%, more than 90% of all the internet data traveling between Europe and Asia runs through one single, incredibly crowded corridor, the Red Sea. Now, because it was the shortest southern path, almost every internet cable on Earth just kind of piled into it, squeezing through a strait that is barely wider than a city. And for decades, that efficiency worked just fine. But as the region caught fire with conflict and cables were literally getting cut, this massive digital artery turned into a terrifying bottleneck. So here's the ultimate dilemma. You've got the Red Sea Trap, which is the singular choke point highly vulnerable to war, where just one cut can drag on for months of repairs. But on the flip side, you have the ideal polar route. Going straight over the top of the Earth is the shortest possible distance between these massive economies. It completely bypasses the Red Sea, and it avoids routing data over land through countries like Russia or Iran. The world desperately needs this alternative. But for decades, actually reaching it was just impossible.
Moving on to Chapter 2, the wall comes down, because an immense environmental catalyst is suddenly making this impossible route a reality.
The impossible place is finally opening up. Right now, today, the Arctic is warming roughly 4 times faster than the rest of our planet. Ice that has literally sat frozen for millennia is retreating. And as we look ahead to the mid-2030s, scientists are estimating we could actually see the very first completely ice-free Arctic summers. So an environment that was permanently sealed off is transforming into open water, water that a ship, and more importantly, a cable-laying crew might actually be able to cross.
Now, we're facing a really deep contradiction here. On one hand, this melt is a massive ecological warning. It's a global climate disaster that's threatening coastlines and ecosystems all over the world. But, on the exact same token, it's a huge business invitation. For a cable engineer, retreating ice means lower latency, it means faster financial trades, and it means absolutely essential route diversity. So the melting ice is a warning, for sure, but it is also an invitation. And let me tell you, that invitation was answered almost immediately.
And that kicks off Chapter 3, the three-way race. With the route opening, an intense contest is totally underway to lay the very first cable across the top of the Earth.
So there are 3 distinct projects racing north right now. First up, Far North Fiber. This is a Western consortium aiming to lay up to 17,000 kilometers of cable through the Northwest Passage, targeting late 2026. Next, you've got Polar Connect. That's a Nordic research initiative pushing for a 10,000-kilometer route straight over the geographic North Pole by 2030. And finally, Polar Express, a 12,500-kilometer Russian state project hugging Russia's Arctic coast, also targeting 2026. Make no mistake, whoever finishes first is going to set the standard for everyone else.
Let's unpack the 2 allied Western bids a bit more. Far North Fiber connects Japan to Ireland, making landfall in Alaska, Canada, Norway, and Finland. And since it's backed by the EU, it essentially acts as a massive insurance policy for the Western Internet. Then there's Polar Connect, which plans to dive directly under roughly 2,000 kilometers of thick polar ice. Together, these 2 represent a vision of open, shared connectivity. They're built to ensure the internet is just way harder to sever at any single choke point.
But then compare that to Russia's Polar Express. This project shares basically nothing with the other 2. Stretching all the way from Murmansk in the west to Vladivostok in the east, the whole thing is entirely financed by the Russian state. This is not some international line. It's a closed, sovereign network totally independent of Western infrastructure. It's designed specifically to wire up Russia's own remote northern ports and reinforce the state's control over the Northern Sea route. It's wild. A single melting ocean is pulling 3 different geopolitical maps in totally different directions.
Which leads into Chapter 4, the merciless ocean. Because nature really doesn't care about our maps, and the physical reality of this new frontier is absolutely brutal. Just let this staggering figure sink in for a second. 1 billion euros. That is the estimated cost of laying just one cable through the Arctic. I mean, that's 3 to 4 times the price of crossing the entire Atlantic or Pacific Ocean. The Arctic does not give anything away for free, and that's exactly why these engineering marvels require such heavy government subsidies just to get off the drawing board.
But hey, the high upfront cost is literally just the beginning. The ocean itself violently fights back. Picture the reality of trying to do a repair job under the ice. First, you have massive icebergs scraping along the shallow seabed, gouging these deep furrows that can easily tear a thick cable to absolute shreds. Second, if a break actually happens beneath 2,000 kilometers of shifting ice, your repair ships are completely blocked by permanent cold. Down in the Red Sea, a break takes months to fix. Up in the Arctic, it might be totally unreachable. And a resilient route is completely useless if you can't reach it when it fails.
Chapter 5, The New Front. Because honestly, the ice and the cold are actually only half the danger.
Neutral plumbing? No such thing. That quote really hits the nail on the head. The Arctic seabed is already highly contested today, with NATO and Russian vessels constantly shadowing each other over shipping lanes and buried resources. The very second you drop a strategic billion-euro fiber optic cable into that exact same seabed, it instantly becomes a target. As we've already seen in places like the Baltic and the Red Sea, cables meant to connect eventually become things to cut.
So, the internet's next frontier is definitely fraught. We're moving away from those crowded, vulnerable southern routes, and we are racing to build the shortest road on Earth across a melting ocean. But simply because of its location, this transpolar fiber is dual-use infrastructure by default. It's something to map, it's something to defend, and yeah, perhaps one day, it's something to sever. The map of the global internet is literally being drawn right in front of our eyes.
Which leaves us with a massive open question to chew on. As the wall of ice comes down and these new cables go in, do we just successfully escape the internet's biggest vulnerability in the Red Sea? Or, by heading north, do we just take that exact same vulnerability and move it to the absolute hardest place on Earth to protect? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. It's a lot to think about, and I'll see you next time as we continue to unpack the massive structures shaping our world.